Right, we have a few more people joining in. For those of you who just joined in, welcome. And we are just gonna give it 5 more minutes for people to sort of join in and start sort of settling in, I guess. And just a few housekeeping things. We do have a chat within Zoom where you can actually introduce yourself, talk to other people, ask questions. There is a Q&A button as well that you will see that you can sort of submit your questions to. Our team is looking through them and they will be sort of bubbling that up to us, to me and other team members, and we'll be answering them during this sort of training session. And yeah, and if you have any other questions or concerns, anything like that, just please feel free to um, submit them either ways. And just so you guys know, we are going to record this session, and the recording will be available in the next 24 hours. If you'll get an email with a link to the recording for the webinar. So if you miss anything or if something happens, please let me know. All right. As we're doing the last few minutes for people to join in, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, where you're joining us from. Um, it's always good to know where people are dialing in. And throughout this session, as that our team is monitoring questions, your comments, your thoughts, and also there will be a couple of polls here and there that we'll be introducing. So please participate in them and give us some feedback on that. Towards the end of the session, you will be prompted to give a feedback through a quick questionnaire. I promise it's very quick. It'll be great if you can give us some feedback on what we covered, what we didn't cover, what could we do better. There's always room for improvement, so it's always good to hear from the team, from you guys, and improve on it. Um, a little bit more housekeeping. We do have another advanced session scheduled for August 20th, I believe, that we'll be sharing a link for later on today in the training session, or you'll get an email with that link in it as well. So if you sort of like what you see today and you want to learn more about the advanced techniques and topics like that, please feel free to join that session as well. Um, I figured out if Zoom allowed us to do some sort of music through Spotify, but can't find it.
You can click share screen and then advanced, and then it'll show you a way to do music.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Thanks, Brad.
No problem.
Now I have to find a good playlist on Spotify. Next time, I will remember that. This is pretty neat. We have people from all over the world, which is amazing. Brazil, Connecticut, Argentina, India. Awesome. Hi, Tori. Hi, Kevin. All right. Awesome. All right. It's good to know a little bit. We're going to start with our first poll. Now we've sort of asked this question during registration as well, but it's always good to know who made it through the session because we had a lot of people signing up and a lot of interesting feedback happening. So we'll give it a few minutes on the poll so that people can sort of answer them, and we will start getting a little sense of who's on the call and from there. And like every other good session, I will be speaking most of the time, but behind the scene, there are three more people who are sort of amazing, helping me out and running, making sure this runs smoothly and I stay on topic and on time and everything else. With us is Briel and Vyansh and Gohar from our team. So they'll be available in the chat sessions. They're available in the Q&A, answering your questions, and they will also be they usually are available through support chats and other places too. So if you want to say hi to them or anything, let me know. And We'll give it 1 more minute for the poll. I'll click start. We have quite interesting voice in chat. All right, we will get started. And let me just end this poll. We have a question from somebody. Hi, Manasi. Sorry if I butchered your name, but if you have a question, you can type in the chat at the bottom. All right. Okay. There we go. All right. We'll kickstart this. Again, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining today. This is a session for all about Botmock 101. This is conversation design and prototyping using Botmock. I'm really excited to have you guys here today. We have a good hour and a half scheduled for this. We do have a lot of things to cover, but at the same time, I want to make sure that we make sure if we answer questions, if you have any concerns or anything like that, we'll make sure we address them as well. So just to give a quick idea around the agenda today, we're going to talk a little bit about conversation design challenges. We're going to talk about power prototyping, what it can do for you. We'll get you oriented with Botmock, how to create a project, how to use the power of journeys, how to handle dynamic input and make your prototypes more fun to use and rather than just click-throughs. And also collaborating with the team. How do you get feedback? How do you work with other team members that you have who are building these chatbots and experiences with you? And running ultimately user testing and how does that play a big role in it? Now, this is going to be the last, towards the end of this, we'll do a quick overview on the developer handover as well. But by all means, this is designed for if you've never done conversation design before, if you've never built a design chatbot before, or if you're in the process of building or designing one, we'll try to cover as much of the basic to intermediate kind of topics here. And then we'll leave the more advanced topics like developer handover and APIs and SDKs and all the things that we have available post design or for your dev teams to work with for the next session that's on August 20th. And those are the two things. So from the agenda perspective. Now, before we start, again, and just a quick introduction for myself, my name is Ubaid Ahmed. I am the founder and CEO of Botmock. I usually try to doing these sessions every Wednesday. We used to do this, but now we're going to switch them up a little bit more and do more in-depth sort of these different training sessions happening. With me on this call, supporting me are three of my other team members, Briel Nikolov, Gohar Shakil, as well as Divyan Shorosia, who are all here to answer your questions and help me make sure I run it smoothly. Um, and if you want to reach me or the Botmock team in general on Twitter, I'm always available at email and Twitter at Obed and at Botmock. So if you have anything to share on those lines, please feel free to tweet at us. Now, let's kickstart with what is happening with conversation design. All right, times are changing. We went from building just simple mobile and web apps to now these conversational experiences. And as these these new mediums are emerging, one of the biggest challenges that we see is that design tools have just not caught up. We still see a lot of companies trying to use old school tools to sort of mitigate and try to build these conversation experiences. But tools like Excel, Visio, Sketch, Lucid Charts are just a few of them, but there's a whole lot of these design tools that are being used, but they're not optimized for conversational experiences. And it's a whole different world to build and design for. You're building these experiences for multiple different channels, whether it is voice only or voice and text or text only. Your customers are chatting with you on Alexa, they're chatting with you on IVRs, talking to you on Facebook Messenger, on your web-based chatbots, and these are hard things to design for. And your product scope is changing. You need to scale your team very quickly. You get more and more stakeholders now involved from different sort of backgrounds in your team and in your company, trying to give you feedback, and as well as trying to get their input into your chatbot. You have more competitors now available on these channels as well. So there's that part of it too. And ultimately your customers demand a good experience on these mediums, right? When they're talking to your Alexa skill or to your chatbot, they have a higher standard of what that value it can provide. And if your chatbot experiences, whether it is again text or voice, or your conversation experience is not designed properly, is not thought out properly, you're going to be disappointing them, and that ultimately leads to a lot of frustration for your users, as well as challenges for teams to sort of figure out why their conversation experience is not working or why is it failing and all that stuff around it. Um, and what we've also seen is that these processes that teams have developed, they may look simple initially, or they may look like organized initially, but as they're building more and more conversational experiences, these things get super complicated. You start going back and forth in different directions, and there's no real coherence on what exactly is happening next and how you're going about it, purely because there's so many moving parts of conversational design, right? These processes ultimately are rushing teams to building experiences that may be subpar to what they really want to build. And that's primarily happening because of the tool sets that you guys are using, or the processes around those the previous existing tools are just not scaling with you when it comes to conversation design. And ultimately that leads to a lot of rush design process, right? You're favoring speed of delivery versus the actual depth of design. And while one or the other, both of them are important to you, important from a design phase perspective, you need a proper design system that scales for you and also allows you to speed up your delivery so that you can experiment and test more often and actually improve on your conversation design as fast as possible. So we asked ourselves this question of 3 years ago: what what if you could have both speed and proper design cycles? And truth be told, 3 years ago when we started Botmock, we were not even scratching the surface of this problem. We saw Facebook Messenger sort of at that time uh, getting a little bit of a foothold, but then we saw Alexa and those devices and voice experiences sort of taking off as well. And these are different worlds by all means from a design perspective, but ultimately from a consumer's perspective, they're just chatting, they're having a conversation with your brand. And from a brand's perspective, from team's perspective, building these experiences, both of these things were critical and are still critical to deliver really good experience. So with that, we built Botmock. And the focus of Botmock really to get divided into these sort of 5 steps around it, right? We want to enable rapid prototyping. We want to enable your team to be able to quickly go from idea to prototype, regardless of what channel you're designing it and building it for, to be able to quickly do that. We want then that system of design to expand and scale within your organization. How does a team that is building voice only experience start sort of leveraging and talking about or building the same kind of quality of system for text-based chatbots and vice versa for IVRs and everywhere else as well. And as you are building and scaling these things, um, the collaboration becomes even more critical because now you have multiple team members, multiple team members of different backgrounds working together to deliver these experiences. It's no longer just a visual design team as and a content team as well as development team. You have now team members who are worried or are more concerned about the quality of your NLU and NLP engines, and as well as your the content and variety and variations in the content and everything else around it, and getting that feedback in one place uh, is super critical because it keeps everybody on the same page. Ultimately, that enables your team to actually work faster and better, as well as being able to deliver something with high confidence. And lastly, having a good developer handoff, being able to go from here's a prototype, here's a design document to your development team and say, regardless of what technology stack you're using to build these things, here's a standard document that will work for you. Now, there's a lot of these pieces here, but this is sort of like the overarching 5 steps around it. Now, what does that do for you? Like, if you were to use these kind of use Botmock and if you identify with any of these steps in your process right now, ultimately, what we want to do is give you a faster time to market. We want to be able to get you guys to go from idea to prototype to the market as fast as possible with as much confidence as possible. And ultimately your users could have better experience, and these conversation experiences are evolving systems as well. So you may launch with something very small, but then as you scale up your use cases, as you tackle more and more use cases, your design needs to scale and it needs to be consistent. When your marketing, sales, and support teams start talking to their customer and building their own individual chatbots, they all need to have a consistent design across the organization so that the customer ultimately is chatting with your brand and not with a particular team inside your brand. And collaboration and having a single source of truth all becomes super critical to achieve all of that. And this is what Botmock brings to the table. And we found teams after teams for the last 3 years. We've helped many teams to do these things for their going from very basic chatbots to really high level, amazing experiences, and truly it has scaled up for them, and we believe it can help your team as well. So with that, let's jump into actually looking at the tool. All right. So let me open that up. There we go. There. Perfect. So with Botmock, as I said, it's a web-based tool. It allows your team to work together on our in one place. And when you sign up, you create a team. You can invite. You can work alone. You can invite your team members, and when you invite them, you can give them some different roles and all that too. So we'll go towards collaboration a bit as well. On the dashboard itself, we do support different channels, and by that I mean, you could be designing for your own custom web chatbot, or you could be designing voice experiences or Apple Business Chat or any of these. And you can, when you create a project, you can actually streamline it and say, okay, that's the kind of like project I'm creating. And the reason that target channel is important here is that each of these channels actually have a design language that they present, right? So what you can do on Facebook Messenger, from a design perspective, it matters because it gives you the ability to say, here are the restrictions that Facebook has, and as a designer, how do I work within those restrictions? And we take care of you for that for you if you pick that channel from get-go. Now we do offer a generic chatbot for your web and mobile that is way more relaxed. It has more sort of feature sets in there that are customizable because you have full control when you deploy it. So we give you that control back in design as well. Now, I'm just going to open up a simple project here just so we can go through that and give a give a quick overview. Now, as you can see, the editing experience, it's a lot like tools like Visio or any other sort of mapping tool, because we wanted to make it easier for teams to actually get started on this. So your learning curve is quite little. You have infinite canvas to design things on, and you can sort of zoom and move them around. But let's walk through a little bit around collaboration first, and then we'll start looking at what the example does, and we will build on top of that. Now, the first thing, you can invite your team members. As you can see, I have Gohar invited here. I can invite Real into this project as well, or I can invite any other new team member just by using their email and giving them the appropriate role. So whether it's reviewer or editor, and they can sort of come along and work on the document with me. We can also share this publicly with a unique URL where they don't need an account to view the project, but they can't obviously make any edits to it. You can always make it private and not allow them to view the document without being part of your team. Now, let's jump a little bit into what this project is really doing. It's a simple chatbot. It allows somebody to start the conversation with your bot and build on top of that. We have a welcome message. We have notes that you can use to communicate within your team on what is happening and what they can do with it. You can visualize with images and quick replies and conditions. So depending on which option the user chooses, you can show them a custom reply, and based on that, you can build things out. Now you'll notice that there's a lot of interesting blocks that we're using here. For example, set variables. We are able to actually manipulate context as we move forward in the conversation. We can update and set some context around it as based on the selection the user has made. And these are critical and important for you because as a designer, your conversation is never going to be just static click-through prototypes. They are dynamic. By definition, these things are super dynamic. And this is by all means a very simple example, but as we build through that, we can connect with more and all that as well. Now, once you've started designing something like this, typically what we saw a lot of teams would do is go, this is step number one for your design phase. You are building these conversations where you are typing in your script, you are building your happy case scenarios. And for the most teams, this is happening either in Excel or Word documents, or it's a simple Visio diagrams where the logic is there, but the content is missing, or lucid charts where they have really elaborated lucid charts, and any tool like that to really create these experiences. Now, even if for a basic example like this, if I were to send you this diagram, it is super hard for me to say, this is how we would get a selection for the user and do something like that, like what the purpose of this chatbot is, right? So what we envisioned early on in Botmock is how do we make that first step of presentation easy? We don't want to create the entire chatbot experience of NLPs and training phrases and utterances and intents, although you can do that in Botmock. But we wanted to just create the ability for designers to say, here's the use case, here's how a typical conversation would happen. What do you think about it? And that's where journeys come in. Journeys are a great way and a powerful way of extracting a particular use case and presenting it to your users so that they can actually give you more concrete feedback without having for you to actually go ahead and create and deploy this experience somewhere just so you can give that experience back to the user. So let's try it out. Let's create one. And you can create as many journeys as you want, by the way. So let's create one, and we will call this our, let's call it like a demo journey. Oops. Now, when you start creating a journey, you will notice that it actually brings you to the starting point, the green block that you see. Every conversation in Botmock, every flow starts from the green block. It's sort of like the entry point for your conversation. You can have as many outgoing connectors from this point. We only have one, and we'll add more as we go. But essentially, even your flow for your conversation journey, starts from the top and says, okay, what is the typical experience that the user is going to have? So we start from there, and you'll notice that the next path is highlighted for you in green. And as you move through it, all you have to do is just click on the red blocks and select which one. Now, when we have a split decision, so for example, over here, the system recognizes that you have two possible paths that you can go into. Which one is part of this journey? So let's say that we want to show our stakeholders that if somebody comes in and selects short hair, that's the path we're going to showcase here. So we go through that. They're going to say yes. And then they're going to get the question for the dog size. And then ultimately, we have a whole lot of these options available now. So now, based on what they have selected, let's go for this one, Golden Retriever, and we can simply showcase that part. Now I'm just going to go ahead and say this is one particular case. Now, if you had loops or anything like that happening here, you'll be able to select them as well. But if I zoom out a little bit more, you can see the entire one particular conversation from my conversation map has been sort of selected, and I can save that as a journey um, in my project. Now, when the journey is saved, there's a couple of things you can do. So why is this super important or super powerful? Now, the first thing it allows you to do is simply, if you're presenting you to stakeholders, we're showing this to them. And by the way, with our reviewer access update coming soon, your reviewers will be able to sort of run these demos directly in Botmock, where they won't be able to edit them, but they can run them. But if for the demo journey that I've created, I can simply run it, and without actually having to do anything, I'm not really interacting anything with it, I'm able to actually see what the conversation flow would be. I see the user replies coming in. I see what options the user, as a user, is going to see when they're chatting with my bot. And based on all of that, I can now emulate entire conversation flow with very minimal effort, right? I mean, this is sort of the simple drag and drop sort of experience that we just got. And believe it or not, this would take you a few minutes to go from, hey, I have an idea for a conversation, to here's what the chat experience would look like. What do you think? Conversation with your stakeholders. And that again is a super powerful way of presenting your ideas without having to invest too much effort in actually building the entire view and all that stuff happening. And most of our customers sort of find this as the very good starting point, where and they're able to present a use case to their stakeholder to move the conversation forward without again having to pretend that they have to build the entire infrastructure around it. Now you can also share this via link to outside of Botmock. You know, you can enable comments or disable them, and people can view it. When they view from that link, they only get to view that particular journey. They don't get to see the entire project. Again, um, keeps their feedback to the point of that particular journey that you're sharing, that use case that you're trying to share with them. You can also download this as a video, and that enables you to share that video, and the video comes out as if it's a real chat session happening. It's very well done, and you can then send it on or share it on any platform outside of Botmock. And obviously, you can always edit them and rename and do all sort of things around your journeys too. And as you're moving along and updating content, so for example, if I go in here and let's say I add another button here. So let's say I have a question, becomes another option here. So as I'm updating my content, I can still go to my journeys and just run them, and it will pick up my latest piece of content directly in those journeys. So when your feedback is coming through, it's mostly usually around content, and if they ask you to move or change a content piece, you don't have to recreate the entire journey for them. You can just simply update it, send them a quick note, and say, hey, can you view the link again, and off they go, and they'll get the latest changes automatically. And again, that significantly improves and speeds up your um, training, sort of your presentation mode. I'm just keeping an eye on the chat window here as well. And I think Tammy had a question for all possible journeys. I mean, that is something that we are looking into and working around. Obviously, the more complicated your project is, the more uh, sort of involved in sort of these experiences become, and we sort of are looking into how do we present that as an option to the users, but definitely something on the works right now. And Tori had a question around journeys with jump blocks. Now, jump blocks, for those of you who don't know, we have this concept of multiple blocks in Botmock. Now, for example, in this project, I can add a user reply, bot says, image, buttons, quick replies, and other ones. There are some advanced blocks that are available in every project. For example, jump that allows you to connect and scale your design by connecting different projects to each other, so that they, from a designer's perspective, you can break them down into smaller chunks. Um, right now, journeys actually just come to a stop at the jump block, so they don't really go into jump block. But that's something that we sort of are experimenting and exploring more with our customers on what would the experience be and how it would be. That is also connected with the new jump block that we're going to be launching soon. I won't tell you details right now because it's still in the works right now, but it will have a lot more power to what we already have in jump blocks. And then there are other blocks as well, like API. So you can call the external API and update your internal sort of context variables based on the response of that API, and you can introduce delays and all that too. So there's a bunch of things happening here. Now, let's build in a little bit more smartness to it, right? So, I mean, button based, these journeys was really good. They enabled you to do sort of a nice little demo for your team members, and get them going. And but those are very early stage in design phase one. Let's say your stakeholders like, this is looking good, let's just make it more interactive. And as a designer, you're like, okay, I want to, I've created this experience, I want to be able to sort of play around with it, I want to be able to interact with this prototype, um, before I start sort of again expanding more and more out there. So we have a ability for a built-in emulator in browser that you can use, so you can chat with your own prototype. Now, initially, if you have these button-based, and I'll show you how we connect all these button-based systems as well. So when you tap on a button, and I'm just going to run through this once so that we can see how it does things. So for example, if I select my options, it knows how to route to the next option properly, and it's waiting for my input in run mode. So it knows um, there are options available, and how do they go about doing that. And once it does all of that, it automatically runs through, and you can see it's a nice little chatbot that does a recommendation for me. And it honestly was pretty neat to test it out, right? Again, no third-party integration needed. You're not sort of moving things around or anything like that. And let's say how we can create that. So for example, we have this simple block here where we have a couple of options, and let's say we have two different options we can go through, right? So based on just this, every connector that you select has some information in it. You can teach our system what to do based on the user inputs, where to go next, and how to interact with it. So for example, for this connector, it's going to edit that. You'll notice that our system was smart enough to know that, hey, you have where you're coming from already has some actionable buttons and options that you present to the user. What do you want me to map over here? Like, which option do you want to map here? So I can map I have a question over here, and I can just simply save that. I don't need any intents. I don't need any NLU right now. I just want to be able to sort of say, if the user says, I have a question, to go this way. Now, to edit any block, you can simply click on the edit button, which is the second one over here. Let me zoom in here a little bit. Or you can click on the drop down and click on edit. And every block that you in Botmock has a few standard fields at the top that you will see. So the first one is the title for the block. This is great if you are building these things. These are great for understanding what the block actually does, what this content piece will do. So prompt help, let's say, and then we have a bunch of options. You can have statuses for every block. So as you're working with your team members, you can say, hey, I'm still working on the content here. This still needs to be done, worked on. This is in review. this particular content piece has been completed. Like you can customize these, by the way, all of them, and make it whatever process you have. It could be 4, 3, 5, 15, doesn't really matter. And then let's add some text here. So we're going to simply say, I think they were like, we have a question. Sure. What can I help you with? Right. Now you can also add variations to your content as you move forward. These variations are available through API right now. So when you query this sort of project through our API, we'll present all of these um, options back to you. Um, you can also do multimodal experience directly in here. So if you have voice enabled, output or input, you can do that as well. And you can customize that as well here directly. So let's do that. We have simple option now enabled. Now on the other one, we already had a selection done, which was let's go button is mapped. And so when we click on run, our system, just because of those two options set up there, we are able to now look at that and say which button did the user press and which way you want to go. So for example, if I press, I have a question, it automatically knows that this is the path I want to take. Again, rapid prototyping. Quickly throw some content pieces together, connect them together with some basic understanding of routing, and off you go. You have a clickable prototype for your chatbots. Now, while that is great, you do run into some other issues, right? So things like these, where you have open-ended questions now, what can I help you with, becomes a little bit of a challenge of an edge case to tackle. And what if the user does not tap on a button and they type in something like, I am inquiring about XYZ, or, like, let's start, or something like that. In chatbots, which is where the conversational AI can become a little bit challenging, is there are many ways the user can give you input. So we need to be able to map them and figure out how does that go. So let's do that. Let's add a little bit more smartness to this, and we will. Just gonna move this guy around here. So let's see if we ask them, the user, what can I help you with? Now there may be a couple of scenarios that we want to map here. Again, at the earliest possible stage, what we're trying to do is simply um, give them some options to say, what is it, what are the use cases that we can tackle? Now, if the user comes in here, and again, let's do from design phase one. So we just simply show a user reply so that we can mimic that, and we can say, I need help with my puppy, right? Or they may say something like, do you have a store location? And I'm just going off a little bit of the script of what the puppy selector thing was, but let's say there's a couple of options you want to present. Now with user replies, it makes it super easy for you to sort of not, again, worry about intents and all that stuff, and just simply get things going, and visualize what the interaction will look like, right? What kind of puppy do you have, right? Um, Now, this is where we can start building these blocks together and gluing it together and making it so that our system sort of shows you what that conversation flow may look like. So if I go into run mode as it is right now, if I go into I have a question, it will automatically go through one of the paths. So it picks the first one that it finds and says, okay, I'm going to go show you what that path would look like, right? Now that is great, again, from just quick testing and visualization perspective, but eventually we want to be able to use more smartness to it. Now, one thing we can do is we can start taking these user reply blocks that you may have designed early on that have a lot of sort of information value in early design processes, but as you're moving forward now, you want to make it more dynamic. So we can change these. So we can simply click on drop down and say, convert this block to an intent. And what it does, it actually takes your user reply block and says, okay, these are all the ways the user can possibly give you feedback in this utterance. So let's convert that into an intent. And when you do that, it actually removes that block, converts it into an intent for you, and adds that to the connector. So let's see what that does. Um, So let me actually show where that is. So all the intents that you have in the system, and we have defined a few of them, right? So they're all available here. Here's the user says one. Let's convert this. So help with puppy, right? So I can say I need help with my puppy. The user may say something like, I have a question about my puppy, right? Or they may specify certain things like, um, I have a question about my short hair puppy, right? Um, Now you'll notice that these are just simply utterances that user can say. Now we have an NLU engine that allows you to do these dynamic inputs and all that. Um, it is great for prototyping. It is designed for prototyping, right? So it enables you to quickly, not have to worry about hundreds and hundreds of utterances to be trained to get better results. In early stages, you can get a lot of good results right out the box. So once we have that, I can go back in there and I can select that, help with puppy intent is there. And now I can do the same thing on the other one, but let me just delete that for now and we can sort of map it later on to something more. Um, so if I run this now, and I say I have a question, it will wait for my prompt and I can say, I need help with my puppy. And we don't have to write the same sentence. As I said, we have an NLU engine that can actually understand variations automatically. Um, Obviously, the more training phase you have, the better variation understanding it will have. But if it doesn't, then it will prompt them, it will give a default error message saying, I did not understand what you're trying to say here. So if I said something like, I need to pay my bills, it probably will come back and say, like, I don't know what you're asking for here. But you can do a lot of fun things here automatically. Now we already have some other wiring done here. So for example, when we presented the option, and this is a very typical situation that have happened in pretty much all chatbots that we've seen, you present a few options to the user, and they come back and they're like, I just want to type in my results. So they may say, oh, I really like fluffy or short haired dogs. And what happens in that case, right? So for example, in this particular block, I want to be able to at this point in conversation, yes, I'm presenting some quick replies, but I want to add some smartness to my prototype and say, what if the user actually gives me input for a particular sort of selection? Now, what that does is we created an intent here that tackles that part. So it says, what sort of dog type you have, and we can look for each of the sort of types that we are presented. So we have two different intents here that match, can look for that. And it can also look for a particular variable in there. And variables, again, are a great way, a concept of capturing information, such as their names and all that stuff around it, and creating a immersive experience. Now you can also add conditions to your connectors by saying by making them routable, by because let's say if the user says I gave you a hair type, but they you want to make sure that based on which one they selected, you route them to point A or B. So you can create these conditions. You can create as many of these conditions as you want to actually showcase that. Now that those are again intents that we've created, variables that we've created, and for each of these variables we've created so for example, for hair type, we have a bunch of built-in entities that can capture information for you, things like names, age, currencies, emails, and all that, things that you will use in Dialogflow and Watson and other places already. But you as a designer can now use that and make sure your design is much more dynamic rather than being static, which again, it really speeds things up. But obviously, there are times, like in ours, where none of our built-in entities can really help you because they're not really designed to pick that variation for you, right? So, for example, the dog size or hair type. Now, when that happens, you can always create your own custom entities in Botmock as well. So let me show you how to do that. So let's say we have a dog size sort of entity right now. So we want to be able to get the input from the user and decide which dog size did they select. Was it big or small? Now, what happens if I have a medium here as well, right? Um, and I can simply add those. And these are just like any other system entities. You can create as many as you want. You can add as much detail as you want in those. Um, and then you can reuse them for different variables. So you may have two different places where you're asking for size or different context variables you want to handle. And these are available to you whenever you create a new variable. These are all custom entities that are available to you now in this project. Um, Again, makes it super easy for you to sort of create those kind of detailed immersive experiences. Now let's talk about it a little bit more. um, let's do a little bit of a um, testing with it, right? So let's run this, and I'm going to go through the process, but this time, instead of using buttons, I'm actually going to try to type in my responses. So if I say, let's go, it knows where to go next. It understands because of the intents that we built in. Um, and these, again, were intents with just few training phrases, just one or two, maybe just to unblock us and get us going with more dynamicness to it. With button options, for example, if I select something like um, go with short hair, it she understands and routes it properly. And one of the things that we have, and as from a designer's perspective, which is very useful, is in the top right corner, we have this button that enables you to see the context variables. And these are context variables based on what inputs are we getting from the user and what are we doing with those inputs. So for example, if I tap on yes, we update the can walk more than 2 times context variable to yes. Um, and as we're building through them, even with sentences like um, go with big. You understand this, the system understands the input and actually captures all of the conditions for you, all the context variables for you. And you can see that based on those, our answers keep on changing. Let me show you how we're doing that. This is again something that a lot of you probably would have, because as you are asking for all these context, as you're gathering all these context variables from the user, at some point you want to be able to use that in your conversation design to say, if the user selected X, Y, and Z, here's how you should react. So for example, in our case, we have connectors where on all of them, we don't care what the user's input right now and like the previous message was, but moving forward, what we want to do is say, hey, in the conversation itself, the user told us some information. They told us what the dog size, the hair type, and can they walk more than 2 times or not. Based on those answers, and these are all the values that we know that we will be capturing from the user, based on the entities and all that we've set up, um, route them accordingly. So in this case, we're going to be routing them down to the French Bulldog or to the Golden Retriever, or as many as you want here. Now again, these are um, some of the building blocks that allow you to build these experiences really, really quickly. Now let's look into a little bit of advanced things. First thing I want to show is set variables. As you can see that, based on the yes or no answers, even with an intent, we want to be able to sort of manually update the context. So set variables are a great way of doing that. So let's say if you ask them a question like, would you like to include shipping, or you're putting the order, you're like, hey, would you like to have a gift receipt with it, or whatever options you may have, your context variables that are not looking for input directly from the user input, but they are something that your system needs to keep track of, can be updated manually or in this case it's going to be executed automatically, but you're setting them up manually into with set blocks. And set blocks are essentially a set of operations that you can do at that particular point in your conversation. So for example, I can go in and update based on certain values. So for example, for here that I'm doing, you selected yes or no, you selected no in this case. I can explicitly set the variable's value to be no here. Now I can actually include expressions here as well. So if I had a little bit of calculations to do, so for example, you wanted to calculate taxes before you show the total value in your prototype, you can do those kind of things directly here. And again, really powerful concept to work with. Now let's add another sort of advanced thing. What happens if the user says something like context switching? right? Now it's always good to have um, a particular path mapped out. But as you and I know, with conversation design, conversation experiences, context switching is quite normal, natural for things to happen. You may be going down a particular route, and you're like, oh, I don't know, I need help, or I have a question before at this point in the conversation. Now, there's many ways you can prototype that, but the easiest possible, for example, when we are looking at these kind of I have a question or I have help kind of scenarios, instead of sort of having that as an option in one of your conversation, what if you could ask that question anytime in your conversation? So what happens if I run this again, and let me hide this guy. So let's say we are going down, very happy, we're here, and then I'm like, oh, I have a question. I have like, I don't know what you're asking for because I honestly don't know what to do. There's only this is one all I'm looking for is a yes or no answer right now at this stage of the conversation. So let's change that. So with Botmock, and the way you do those kind of global intents and being able to listen to these sort of global intents at any point in the conversation is on the starting point. Now, we can create a new connector, but I already have a nice block that tackles with the help. So I am going to take this existing connector and just move it around. So I'm just going to click on the connector and move it to the green block and drop on top of that. Now, there's a lot of things you can do to customize these things. These lines that we're drawing, you can move them around. You can pick and choose uh, which side do you want this to be on, right? So you can easily have that. You can even move the label around. So there's a lot of this design customization you can do, but that's not what we're trying to do here. We are going to modify this particular connector to handle that global I need a help query from any part of the conversation. So first thing first, let's go into the connector itself and let's add some information to it. First thing I want to do is add an intent. And I'm going to add a help intent, and I'm going to say something like, I have a question. That's something user can say, or they may be able to say something like, help me, or just help, or I'm lost. Again, a couple of variations that you want, save that. And one thing you'll notice is that we have this option now that is available to you because this intent is on a connector that is connected with the top level of the root of the conversation. We enable this option that says trigger this intent from any part of the conversation. So now our system is going to listen for that intent um, essentially during any part of the conversation. But what it does smartly is that it does not actually wait for the user to select A or B path. It actually understands that, hey, I have a path that is ready to go. I can go down that path, but the rest of them are only triggering when that global intent gets triggered. So that sort of really enables you to, again, create some experiences. So let's go through this. I'm gonna go, let's go, and fluffy, and all fun stuff is gonna happen. It's gonna ask me a question, but again, this time I'm going to say something like help, and you'll notice that it actually understood that part and actually switched the context over for me automatically. And again, this is some interesting and powerful concepts that you can use to demonstrate to your stakeholders how that sort of context switching or the global intents are going to trigger. What are the parts of the conversation that only get triggered when the user wants them to be triggered and not all the time? So these are, again, really good concepts to sort of use. Now, we can use that concept in a couple of ways. We can do that as a restart. So, if I'm just going to set variables here, and on this connector, let me add another one called restart intent. And you can create as many intents as you want, really. So I'm just going to add one training phrase here, restart. And let's name this restart here. And what happens in the restart? Well, we're going to set some context variables. We're going to reset some context variables, but we're also going to just move the conversation forward. Now, if I don't add any intent or any data on a connector, really, other than a label, the system automatically flows the conversation forward. It picks the next possible path and says, okay, you want to go next to this particular block. And that's what typically what a connector really does. Let's edit this variables. What do I want to do? I want to be able to reset all of these variables that I have. All right, so what I want to do, I want to set their values to something. Well, technically, I just want their values to be nothing, right? This was a yes or no question. I don't want it to be anything. If the dog size, I just want to leave them empty, reset them to their default values of being empty. So let's save that. And now if I run through this, and I am going to open my debug mode here as well. Uh, and I forgot to do this to be global. It's not listening in for that. Let's do that again. All right. So if I go through this, I'm gonna go a little bit ahead. And at this stage, if I say restart, you'll notice that it actually goes through and should have updated. There's a demo thing. There you go. All the variables are actually reset now, and I'm back at the top of the conversation. So now I can go back in there and say, here's what has happened, here's where things are, and at any point in the conversation, I can just restart things. And you can use this concept to anything you want for different things. So it makes it super easy for you to sort of mimic that. Now, I want to show quickly about a little bit of voice experience. So let me open my screen bot here and let's build that out. So here's a simple bot experience. Let's actually delete these guys because we're going to build this up a little bit more. But let's say you have a simple ice cream bot that basically starts off, the user says, I could go for something sweet, or let's say they say, Alexa, open ice cream bot. Right. So you have a trigger, and this is designing for Alexa skill set. So the only content blocks that I have available here are those that Alexa supports. So these are the text input and the user coming out, replies coming as audio as well. So you'll notice that when we actually edit this, there are a couple of options here. So one is simply a text that we want to be able to speak back to the user. And you can even attach your own custom audio files, so you can play those instead of the text to speech kind of thing. But let's do this. Let's simply run this. I'm going to make sure that I'm not muted here. Yep.
Alexa, open ice cream bot.
Speaking of sweet stuff, do you like ice cream?
So you notice that we automatically created audio for you. So your sort of Alexa skills and Google Assistant prototypes or voice prototypes are more dynamic. You can actually have input and output in audio automatically done for you. And these are generated dynamically as well. So if I had variables or things like that shown here, it will route properly. So let's do that a little bit. Let's add a simple yes and no replies, right? So if the user says yes, we want to go one way, or if the user says no, we want to go the other way. So if they say no, we can say, boo, who does not like ice cream? And this is the no path. So I'm just going to do that. And this is the yes path. Let's go woohoo this time. Now let's add a little bit of that to it. Let's edit this connector. I'm just going to go ahead and add a yes intent, and then keep things simple. A simple no intent. Let's do no here and save that. All right. So if I run this now,
Alexa, open ice cream bot.
Speaking of sweet stuff, do you like ice cream?
And you'll notice that it actually is waiting for my input now. So I can, for emulation perspective, I can actually type in my my answers, or I can speak to it. So I can press the microphone button here, and I can say yes.
Woohoo! Which flavor?
And it enables you to actually have a voice prototype where your user, your tester, can actually chat with it and actually interact with your prototype. Now, Kevin has a question about Alexa Live announcement for Alexa for apps, being able to switch handoff from a voice conversation to web and mobile apps. That's actually something that we are adding support for soon. in your prototypes, you will be able to switch from one medium, one channel to another channel using our new jump blocks. And that's something that will take care of all the context switching and everything for you. But you'll be able to emulate the entire flow where the user may be going from a voice experience to chat or chatbot to voice, or even going from a Facebook Messenger chat to somehow into WhatsApp chat. Whatever way you can want to envision that, that's something that we'll be adding support for soon. I'm really excited about that. I think that's really going to improve how these experiences can be then designed and built and improved on. So we're chugging along. I want to show a couple of more features from collaboration perspective before we move forward in different directions. So that's that. First thing, as you're working with your team members, one of the things that you probably are doing is versioning your documents by renaming them into V1, V2, V4 documents. And we did that before we built Botmock, and I know that was a big pain. In Botmock, as you're working through these projects, you can create what we call snapshots. Snapshots are basically a captured version of your project that is non-editable unless you restore it, but it is a, sort of a copy of your project in time. So you can create a snapshot and name it anything you want. If my browser does not like me, let's see. Yeah, there you go. So I can name it anything I want. I can say this is the version 1, and then I can save these snapshots. And these snapshots are then available. You can actually view them, all the snapshots you've created. I only have created one. You can restore them, but you can't really edit them until you restore them. So they're like time and point. They are accessible through the API. So your dev team can still access them, and they are frozen in time for them. Everything about the project is frozen in time for them. So there is that. Now, the other thing you can do is export to PDFs, which I think every one of us loves to have. And so you can share those PDF diagrams anywhere. And the last thing I want to show before we start answering questions here is the user testing. User testing is one of those features that once you have a good prototype working, you almost always need. And for most of our customers, this was happening mostly by actually deploying things onto some sort of build platform just to showcase, just to get that early feedback. So what we can do in Botmock is simply set up a user test. So we'll set that up for this particular project from scratch, and then we'll see what that does. So to do that, just simply click start testing it. I can upload an image. So let me do the comic version of Botmock here. Actually, I should use a better one here. Let's do the sticker one, a bunch of ones. I can give it a title, so user testing, which I can give it some sort of introduction for the tester, like what do I want those testers to do? And this is again a great way to tell them, I want you to complete a specific task in this test, or I want you to do X, Y, and Z, and that sort of enables them to do that. Now, at the end of the test, you can also show them what that thank you message is, and you can customize that to your liking. You can password protect it. You can set your test up for 2 different ways. One is free form. You just want them to chat with your prototype. There's no real goal. You want them to sort of browse around and give you some general feedback. The other thing you can do is you can actually do a goal based. You can say, I want you to actually go in there and actually do X, Y, and Z. And I want you to actually reach this particular block. I'm looking for that. So behind the scenes, you can set it up. So let's save this. And what ends up happening is you get this nice unique URL. And that URL is accessible. You can send it to anybody you want. I'm just going to open an incognito window here and go to the URL. Now in this case, they see, this is what the tester will see. They don't get to see your project. They don't get to see the entire flow. They only get to see the actual landing page that we designed. So I'm just going to go John Smith here. John is a good friend of ours who does a lot of testing for us. And John comes in and launches a test. Now, John only gets to see the chat window. She has no idea what the intent model behind the scene is, how it's being trained, and what it can do and can't do. We just want to get some feedback from it. No wiring required from your end, no wiring required from John's end. They just works out of the box for them. And let's do this. So John comes in and let's say, let's go. Present some option. And let's say they just tap it in. Yes. And what we're going to show here is that from a user's perspective, they're just chatting with a bot, right? They're chatting with, in their head, a live bot. But our prototype is responsive enough to actually walk them through it. So if they say start over, they can go back to the top of the conversation and do that. Now, John has completed that task and they're like, oh, this is great. I completed a chat session. I really like it, or whatever that may be. They end the session. We start capturing some feedback from their end. So we capture all the transcript. We give them a nice little field to give feedback. And typically what our customer experiences were that they would do a lot of effort in actually getting a QA version of their bot up and running, or they will sort of send a link out to them. And then they'll get an email reply from John saying, I don't like the way the first question was. So the first question needs clarity. Now, if you just got an email by just saying this, it's a little confusing because you're like, what about it? What did John really do in that session? So you have to look through the logs. So back in the prototype itself, in the user testing, you can see the session comes in, it's completed. We can actually replay the entire session. We can actually see exactly what did John do, what were the utterances that they typed in, what options they selected, how were they interacting. And the really cool part is you can actually visualize the entire journey across your path and say, this is what John did. This is how they went through it. If they stopped in the middle, if they abandoned the test, anything like that, you get to see where exactly that drop-off happened. And from a designer's perspective, it really, really adds a lot of value, because from a design perspective, is it the content? Is it the intents model? Is it the menu system was too complicated, or whatever the case may be, but you can capture this information. You can run thousands of these tests and get data. So that's where user testing can come in, and it's super easy and handy to do that. Now we have a question from Santiago about context. All right, let's talk about that. So the main thing to think about is that you have variables that are actually part of your context, right? So these are context variables that may be loaded when the chat session starts, that you may be capturing from the user, or you're updating them as you go. And for example, let's say these are a couple of 3 variables that we're playing with. And each of the variables, if we're capturing that from the user, then we track that and say where, we track that and say, how do we capture the information for that, right? So as I said, we can design entity types. You can build your own entity types to do that. But once you've captured that information, it's available to you in your context. So you can reuse that. So for example, let's say, let me crunch your input. So they said, hair type plus dog size equals, right? And we want to use those information that we have captured back into our content. So we can do that directly. We can have content blocks now that are going to be dynamic. Now, what happens if I actually enter something here that is not big or small? So let's run through that example here first. So I'm just going to go through this. So what happens here if I say something like, I'm not sure. I set that up as a training page for the help. So it's just back here. Let me restart this thing. Let me go back here. Do you have extra large? My intent is aggressive because I don't have enough training phrases here. I'm just going to go ahead and remove this guy for a bit, just for the training purposes. Right. This time, I'll get it right. We have medium. Oh man, this is going to be bad. I modified this to actually add medium to the list. So it actually detected that and said, hey, that's the correct value there. So let's remove that as well this time. And let's go for that. And it trains fairly quickly, so you can make those changes and come back into chatting with it. So right now it doesn't understand what information I'm trying to give them, right? It knows that I need to go into a particular direction, but it doesn't know what's missing from that input, right? So there's a couple of ways you can capture that information as well. So let's go and zoom directly into this area right now. So what we want to do is we want to say that this intent, um, right now you saw a very generic error message that says, sorry, could not understand what you're saying. But technically it did understand it. It just didn't have the confidence to move forward. It didn't have all the information. So what we want to do is simply add a little bit more information to it. So we can say, you can see that we have a couple of variations of how the user can give information, but we have these slot filling available here as well. So you can actually manage your context switching, or context not switching, but slot filling for your context if it's missing at that particular point in the conversation. So I'm just going to go and say this is required and add a reprompt that says, what dog size, right? And let's go back here. And if I go through this again, and if I do medium dogs, it'll actually come back and say, oh, I know what you're trying to give me, but you didn't give me all the context that I need to move forward. I need the size to move forward. And if this time, if I give it the right context, it will know that it will move forward properly. And it actually uses the rest of the information for you. So there's a couple of ways you can do that, but we do support slot filling and all that directly in there as well. There was, okay. What else? So that's some parts of it. Now, again, a couple of advanced features that we're going to cover in our next sessions. I want to open more for Q&A as well. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to do that. Tori has a question around recommendations for setting up very large, complex conversation flows. Ideally, you want to be able to sort of use jump blocks for that as much as possible. And with jump blocks, what you're able to do is say, based on certain, and what we recommend is that, when you start things off, you may not actually know where to use a jump block right away. So that's going to happen over time is you're going to take some content and say, okay, it's from this project, and I'm just going to move into a different project as well and do all sort of things around it. So for example, maybe I'm going to go ahead and delete this guy. And let's say it's the help one. So maybe, for example, in this case, the help section of your bot could be a completely different project that you want to jump into and let the user be serviced by that help sort of conversation flow. And you can do that by simply, let me go ahead and delete this guy and delete this guy. And let's add one for jump block, right? So the jump block here, we're going to listen for a particular input from the user. So that would be your help intent. And let's say it's triggered by anywhere else. And once that happens, what happens in the jump block is you can actually either jump to a different part of your existing project, but in this case, we want to jump to a different project altogether. So I'm just going to call it the help project and save it. And it will actually create a new project for you and connect them together from the backend. So in that help project now, I can have a completely different experience. I can have a different designer building this as well, or different approval process or whatever that might be. So that sort of brings it full circle. So let's add something here. It will be, how can I help you? And I'm just going to leave it like that for now. And actually, let's add one more user reply here. And I'm not sure my query is ending here. But anyways, so we have the help project now saved up. This is sort of all. I should have selected that help project here and saved it. That would help. Okay, so now that we have that, you can have as many jump blocks in your project. You can have as many of these global intents and routing as much as you need. And what you can also do is you can actually move your content from one project to another project as well. So for example, I can take a block, I can copy it into clipboard, and I'm just going to go ahead into help project and simply paste it here. So I can take an existing piece of content from project A, select multiple of them, and move into project B, and sort of refactor my projects as I go along. So let's put this a little bit better. So we'll show them a little bit of photos before we move. Um, so those are different ways you can organize. Now we have customers who have designed one giant project with everything in it. Works fantastic for them. Good for them for that. We have customers who break it down into very small chunks as much as possible into manageable chunks and use jump blocks to do all that. Now, if you use jump blocks like that, which would help what's happening in the next few releases, that we will actually, when you're in the run mode, not only will switch into that. So let's look at what this will do. So if I go to let's go, and at any point, if I just say help, you'll notice that it actually jumps into the help block and into that project and just continues the conversation forward. So in your run mode, in your user testing, you basically run on the most top level project, and everything underneath it kind of gets consumed automatically. Now, one thing that it doesn't do right now is passing the context to the jump blocks. That is something that we are working on and passing and doing that, releasing that soon. So your projects will be able to not only jump to each other, but be able to sort of keep the context into the next one as well, and sort of help you make sure that your projects are more smarter, it's corrected smartly as well. So that's and it will remember where you jumped off from and then come back to where you left off. All those things will be done. So I believe that answers your question around the large projects and complex. We can do that. For the next release, there's a lot of fun things happening, a lot of interesting stuff happening. We have a better jump block. We have the ability for you to create flags and making your collaboration and browsing your projects easier. We have a support for running multiple user testing types of user test in one project enabled soon. A bunch of other things happening on collaboration, commons, and all that. These are all released. We release every 2 weeks or so. So some of these features will start coming in next week or two, I believe. But you will get emails as soon as they're released. You will get emails on those featured releases so that you can try them out. And that is on that end. What else? I feel like I missed something, and I'm just looking through my notes. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So the last thing I didn't show this is the revision history. This is again something that a lot of you will find useful. The question that usually your team is asking you is like, who made what change? Why was this changed? When did this happen? How do I get comments on it? So we track all of your changes as you go along. So for example, when I added a button, if I make some changes here and I remove it, or something like that, we keep track of all of those changes directly for you, and those are available. Now, the other thing is on the comments are attached directly on your content block. So you no longer are browsing through and trying to figure out, okay, where the comments are in email and stuff like that. You can mention team members directly here. You can always add comments on a document level as well. But obviously when you're getting feedback from your stakeholders and reviewers, it makes sense to have it that way. So we have some questions. Is there a way to interconnect workflows? Can you elaborate on that, Tori, a little bit? I'm not sure what you mean by that. So you can do that. So that's a good question. So the way it works is that it actually gives priority for it's how you're going to organize your chatbot. So if you have the word schedule being used in multiple intents in different places in your conversation, it actually understands that. So for example, this yes and no question, these intents can be reused in different places. And it would know that I am actually in this context, the subcontext is sort of evaluated first and then goes outwards. So global triggers will only happen if there is no other intent looking for that locally first. So, and that sort of should help with that similar word kind of thing. Then we have a question. So Tori is asking for across projects, integrated workflows. So within, I mean, in each project in Botmock has certain things individual to itself. So for example, the comments and all that are individual to that particular project. The workflow tab here, like the ability to sort of have statuses for each of the content block, it's happening on a per project basis. But there are certain things that you can do to share among projects as well. So for example, the intent library that you have, you can take any intent and make it shareable with other projects so that you're not redoing them again and again. So for example, I can take the no intent here. And if I know that there are other projects in that my team is building that are going to use a similar kind of intent, I can make that shareable and I can save that and say, yes, I'm really, really sure. And you notice that it actually says shared now. And if I update it here, every other project in my team that is using that intent will automatically get those updates as well. So if I go to my other project, the health project, I can go into intents and I can import any of my global intents directly here. And now they are connected together. So these are ways you can share among projects, information among each other. These scalable design systems is something that we'll cover in our advanced sort of topics as well. Sharing variables. Oh, no, am I missing a question? Okay, what about content management with big projects? Yep. So I think this sort of helps your question around how do we share intents so that we're not repeating the intents in different projects, and that can be done. About sharing variables. So right now, as long as the variable is being used inside an intent, it's automatically shared as well. But moving forward, your intents, variables, and entities all will be shareable. That is going to make it easier. Tammy, we don't have a way to link a note to a block, but think of them as sticky notes. So you can just put them like on top of it or right beside it. I think that may help. But yeah, if you move this around, it is not aware of the note around it. But yeah, I mean, you can always, it's a little bit more flexible in that sense that it actually just tags along onto as a sticky note on your project. Is there a way in the export identify content type of the intent? In our API export, you can, because we pass you all that information. In the PDF export right now, that is not the case, but we are probably going to have that available soon as well. That's something that we are exploring in terms of what can and can't be done. So Tori, yes, the workflow statuses across all the projects and everything, that's again something that we are in the design phase for. We don't have a clear path on exactly how that information will bubble up, but that's something that we can connect with you afterwards and bounce some ideas off. We are exploring that as a sort of at a team level, similar to how comments and all that could happen. So workflows are across all of your projects. What is the status, where things are, and all that. So that's something that we are exploring right now with some of our customers. I'll probably have more details for you soon on that. All right, so we are almost to the top, and this has been really, really good. Some really amazing questions, and there's a lot of things to cover. These things are, as I said, the tool itself is there to help you streamline your entire conversational experience for your teams to go from one person to 50 and scale your design teams as we go. And we're just scratching the surface with the tool itself. We have a lot of features, a lot of things that we want to do. And if you have been with us for the last 3 years, you probably have seen some significant improvements already, and there are way, way more to come now. So we're always happy to get feedback. We're always happy to get your questions. If we didn't cover some of them here, please feel free to send us through email. We'll be happy to set up a one-on-one call with your team, with yourself, to help you and to help answer those, to set up more sessions to be more focused on those kind of topics. Please feel free to let us know. The aim here is the tool is as good as we can help you utilize it. So if there are certain parts of the tool that are not working for your process, or if you have things that can help you improve your process, please let us know. We're always excited to get your feedback. And as I said, you will get a questionnaire at the end with an email. Please feel free to fill it out and give us some feedback, or just simply email us at help@botmock.com. Thanks, Al. And Al has been using this for a while, so that's great to hear that, Al. And again, thank you, everyone. The recording for this will be available in the next 24 hours, and you will, if we missed it, it will be available on our YouTube channel as well as through email. And thank you, everyone, and talk to you guys soon.